the Testimonium Flavianum, Josephus mentions that it was the protoi, the first men who accused Jesus before Pontius Pilate. And if you read his autobiography, Josephus also wrote an autobiography, and he says several times that he knew the protoi of Jerusalem. And of course, this makes sense. He was
he said it using those terms, that he knew the protoi, or
he says, I began in 51 or 52 AD. He says, I began continually meeting with the protoi and the chief priests. And
that's awesome.
This term comes up several times. It's not just a one reference. It comes up repeatedly several times over his later career, over the next 20 years. And of course, you think about it logically, he knows the high priests, he knows kings, he knows the head of the Sanhedrin. Obviously, he would have known these people. So here we have this claim where he says it was the protoi who accused Jesus. And then 20 years later, in 51 or 52 AD, he says, I began continually meeting with the protoi. And it's just a simple deduction to conclude that, well, if he knew this group of people who had Jesus accused before Pontius Pilate, and he knew them 20 years after the fact, he probably knew there's probably still people around 20 years later who were part of that group. And I do a further word study on this, because Josephus doesn't just say it was the first men. In the Testimonium Flavianum, he says the full phrase he uses is the first men among us. And that phrase among us, it's very Josephine. He likes that phrase. And the question is, what does he mean by that? Does he just mean, the first men among the Jewish people? Or does he mean something more specific? And he uses that phrase about 50 times. In my book, I look at every single instance that he uses that phrase, and he appears to use it to mark direct personal knowledge. So I think in the Testimonium Flavianum, he's indicating that he actually did know some of the people at the trial of Jesus.
Do you mention in your book Josephus's dad as a potential source for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think
tell us about that.
He could have been, his father was a priest. His father was not just any priest, was a very eminent priest. Now, Josephus never uses this vocabulary, but his description of his father clearly implies that his father could have been classed one of the first men of the Jewish people, though Josephus doesn't actually use that phrase. But the fact that his father was a priest, the fact that his father was 25 years old when Jesus was crucified, the fact that his father and mother were from Jerusalem, what this means.
Do we know if Matthias, his dad, was in Jerusalem at that time?
Here's the thing. I think he must have been. And I think he must have been because A, he lived in Jerusalem. He was an aristocrat from Jerusalem. But B,
he did live in Jerusalem at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Well, Josephus says Josephus, was born and raised in Jerusalem. So it seems probable. But
he was born in 37, right?
He was born in 37.
So that's 4 to 7 years after Jesus's crucifixion. So, but we don't know if we can actually place Matthias, his dad, and that family in Jerusalem in the year 30 or 33.
Yes, if it was just that evidence, I don't think we could. It would be plausible, but not. We couldn't prove that with any kind of certitude. But that's not the only piece of evidence. The other evidence is that when was Jesus crucified? Well, he was crucified according to the 4 Gospels, according to the Jewish Talmud. He was crucified over Passover. Passover is a pilgrimage feast for ancient Jews. And if you're a priest,
so he would have been there.
And priests not only would have done it because they were following Jewish law, but because they needed the priests to be there to do all the temple sacrifices. Josephus tells us hundreds of thousands of people were coming. You had hundreds of thousands of sacrifices. You need all priests, all hands on deck. So he would have been there. He would have been in the city when Jesus was crucified. He would have been 25 years old. His mother probably would have been at least 20. This is a public act, the trial, the portions of the trial were public. The crucifixion was public. So, of course, it's possible that his father witnessed Jesus. Certainly, it's quite likely his father knew about the events that were going on during this Passover and could have communicated that to Josephus.
Yeah,